Monday, November 24th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, we are taking a trip back in time. Back to the time of Confederation through letters sent to former Premier Joey Smallwood. Premier, we hear what people send to him and also some responses. Stay tuned. Yeah, a team of researchers put together hundreds of letters into a book called Dear Mr. Smallwood, Confederation in the Words of Those Who Lived It. So that's folks' hopes, dreams, challenges, glimpses of who they were, the time, the place, the context, the politics of the time. A lot of folks asking for some financial help, too, from boats to disability issues, accessibility issues, you name it. It's all there. This is I guess you can call this part two of the audio accompaniment of this book. Vicki Hallett is here. How you doing?
Hello, great, thanks.
I think so and we've got two other guests here in studio. A fantastic guest on the line. I'll introduce everyone shortly. But just you're back. This is our second round. Everyone must get really annoyed when I do this every single time I have a book. But this is, and it. You know what? If for folks timing it back at home, there's a lot to this one.
There's a lot to this one. Yep, it's meaty. It's exciting.
And it feels great. It looks great.
It looks beautiful. Randy Drover, Mon Press, amazing.
Yeah, so good. Tell us a bit, expand on what I'm holding here in my hand.
Yeah, okay. So you are holding the result of the labor of many, many people, the love of many people, two of whom are with us in this studio. Contributors went into the archive, Smallwood's archive at the Archives and Special Collections at Memorial, and we asked folks to go in, read letters from all across Newfoundland and Labrador. So there were 28 electoral districts at that time, in 1948 to 1950. And we asked folks to go in and read a selection of letters and then sort of pick out what jumped out at them, what grabbed them, what moved them, and then respond to those letters. And then we also have a selection of essays that sort of give the historical context of the time. So more scholarly essays and more personal reflective essays. Plus we've reproduced 8 to 10 letters from each district across the province in the book. So that's why there's so much to it. Yeah. And of course we have, an introduction that Sonia and I wrote, an essay from the archivist about the archives. So there's lots in here that people can sort of dip in and out of. You don't have to read it front to back. You can sort of pop in any place and look at one particular district and see some letters and what people said about them.
Well, that's why I was doing that over the weekend, and it's so great because sometimes you can, depending on how much you like to read, right? You can sometimes look at a book and be like, oh my gosh, it looks like it's intimidating. Not at all. Like like you said, you thumb through this and it's just letters from everywhere, and they're just like, you can just randomly find things in here, and it is just so neat that it speaks to the, it's like, dear Monday, August 8th, 1949, the Honourable J.R. Smallwood. Dear Sir, I'm a man who served with the Newfoundland Forestry Unit in Scotland for 5.5 years. After being over there 2 years, I tried to enlist in one of the armed forces, but wouldn't be admitted, being told that the work being done by the foresters was too essential. And he goes on, right? And then there's a request in there. And this is one of the, Joey wrote back to him in this one. So it's the window that this provides of the time and place is just really something.
It really is.
Yeah. But why? I mean, because you've already kind of answered it, but what was and I'll bring Sonia in now too in a second. What was the jump off of getting saying, no, we need this. This needs to happen.
Right.
As I shake this book angrily in the studio here.
I love it. So Sonia was the one who really had the first idea and sort of came to me because she had been introduced to the archive by Terry Bishop Sterling, historian at Mon, who introduced her to this archive, and Sonia started working with it, researching it, and teaching in some of her classes. And then I did the same once I heard about it and started teaching with it as well. And so when Sonia approached me a few years ago and said, the anniversary of Confederation is coming up, and we really need to do something with these letters because we love them, whenever we teach them, the students love them. They're fascinated. Some people are finding relatives. Some people who are new to the province are getting a whole new window onto the province. They're just such a rich, beautiful, textured treasure trove, as we keep calling it. And to hear the voices of people from the past, it gives you a different perspective, a different connection. It's an affective connection in the sense of it's emotional. You physically can touch these things. I mean, it's tremendous. And it's not about sort of relitigating the Confederation debate.
No.
Right? It's not meant to be, oh, we should have done this or we should have done that, or everyone was. It's about saying Newfoundlanders and Labradorians were engaged in this process. They were thinking about it. They were aware of the issues. They were listening on the radio to the National Convention. They talk about that. They were deeply invested in what was happening and in their futures. And they wrote to Smallwood about all kinds of issues in their lives. Oh. And there's no other way to get this history only through these kinds of documents. They're just so fascinating.
And it was like some folks just wrote congrats on it. Others wrote about the roads on the southern shore and being like, and I was just like, well, I mean, that could be an email today, right? Like easily.
Yes, yeah. And so many of these things that we see coming up again, in politics now, food security, cost of living. Yeah.
Well, on the accessibility disability side of it too, you had folks writing in because just saying, "Hey, what happens with Canada now?" Well, like one person was like, "I get $10 a month or something like that," right? And it's like it's not enough to live. Will there be something for me? And this now, as stories coming out or for developments in St. John's around universal design being brought in, the themes are all there. So you're co-editor, and also, in Prof Department of Gender Studies at Memorial University. Sonia Boone is on the line, co-editor, award-winning researcher, writer, a teacher, currently based in, is it Halifax now? I'm always trying to remember where you are whenever I reach you, Sonia.
Yes, it is Halifax now, yes, for the last 2 years.
How you doing?
I'm great. I honestly still can't believe the book is here, and every time I touch it, I can't believe it's real. So it's very exciting.
Tell us more about from the initial discussions to getting it in your hands and seeing it. And then I got a couple extra questions for you.
Yeah, sure. No, I think, Vicky's touched on a lot of things already. And one of the things I think that was really important to both of us is that it wasn't about being pro or anti-Confederation. It was really about what were people on the ground thinking and letting them speak for themselves in what they were saying. And what I had a conversation with one of the contributors over the weekend, and I said, it's like listening in on a kitchen table conversation. Yeah. You can hear people's voices. Like you can absolutely hear them speaking, and it's like they're talking to you right now. And that, to me, is the amazing part of this collection of letters. And, we were only able to include such a small minority of all the letters. But I think that when I have talked to other contributors, they felt the same way, this idea that they're listening in on a conversation. They're hearing people's voices the way they spoke. The dialect is very present and prevalent throughout the letters.
As you get started, how did you decide who else to kind of start shepherding in around this for the project? What was the conversation like there?
I think Vicky might be able to might give more insight into this as well. But certainly it was, we sat down and said, who do we think would be interested in a project like this? Mm-hmm. Like who would be interested in that? And then we started reaching out. And some of those were former students. Some of those were members of the community. Some of those were other people that we knew. We wanted as broad a range of people as possible. So we started asking people over the length of time it took to produce the work, and because the pandemic happened and, all sorts of things happened, we lost a couple along the way and gained new ones along the way as well. But I think our goal was to be as broad as possible, but to really bring in people who we thought would be interested in the project.
So we've got Kate Leahy and Jennifer Morgan here. Who wants to go first?
Can I read my letter?
Yes, go for it.
So this is not my letter.
Yeah.
This is a letter we did not include in the book.
All right.
But it's just, it was irresistible. This is to show you a reject, and it's brilliant.
And by the way, when I always look at these shows almost like the DVD bonus feature, right? So you've got something that goes out with a book, and like here it's like this extra bit, not even in there, but if you listen, read the book, you get so much more of an appreciation around the whole thing. So go for it.
Yeah. Dear Sir, You will have to excuse me for writing you. You are the only one I can look to in this time of trouble. Mr. Smallwood, my son got in with some bad company and a store was broken into. He is one of the accused. I really know he is not guilty, but what can I do? They have to appear in Supreme Court this session. Mr. Smallwood, is there anything possible you could do to help? He is the only help I have. I have another son. He's getting married. I have more small ones, and I have no help in any way and no one to work for me. My husband has been left home for the past 10 years. My children didn't have a shoe or a piece of clothes before they got their family allowance. I scraped along by working here and there. I never had anything from the government in my life. I guess my son have to go to jail. I will have to apply for relief. The old house I am living in is falling down, and it leaks like a basket. I haven't got the means to repair it. I know you will understand my circumstances. I would never be able to write it all. I'm loaded down with trouble. Now, Mr. Smallwood, I am writing you to see if you could possibly take some of this trouble for me. I helped you in the elections and would again if I could. Our little children would be coal if it were not for the hard work to fight on, to see dear little children on the streets, going to school, all dressed up. You come to my mind. I hope you will reap a richer reward in heaven, Mr. Smallwood. I know you will excuse me for writing you. Hope to hear from you. I remain yours truly.
So, I mean, fantastic letter there. What spoke to you about it? Like, why were you interested?
Well, this is one that Sonia passed on, right? Mm-hmm. So it says St. John's. It might have been in the file that I went through.
Right.
I read everything in the file. Mm-hmm. And it was all these really poignant voices.
Yeah.
That's not the one I chose.
Yeah. Well, what is it about that one you like, though?
Well, first of all, the language, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that, all mothers, it's always someone else. It was another mother's child who's the troublemaker.
Yeah.
So but the way we always say it is that he fell into bad company.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't his fault, right? And the other thing is, and this is something you kind of touched on, the person they're talking to, these people have a personal connection with Joey Smallwood.
Yeah.
They've worked on the campaign. They have also listened to him for years as the barrel man. Mm-hmm. And he was a complete charmer. This woman may even have met him during the campaign. He was one of these people who could never forget a name and could work a room like nobody and was very charismatic. And everyone felt like they had a personal connection with him.
Yeah.
Starting with his radio work, right? And so I think that whole relationship comes up, and also this element of you owe me now, which comes out very much in the letter that I did choose. Yeah.
And we'll get back to the letter you did choose in a second. I'm just asking everyone else in the room any thoughts. And on the phone, I consider the phone in the room too. But any thoughts on the letter and just some of the elements that came out of here? Because again, it's that asking for support. You're hearing about, in this case, there's some trouble and ended up in court and stuff. But it's a house in disrepair. There's a lot of stuff there. Any thoughts?
I mean, I think for me, something that really came across in all of the letters was the sense that there was an invitation to ask for something that you needed. I think that was an explicit part of this campaign. And I think what struck me was how misleading that ask really was.
Yeah.
When I was going through the Burin Peninsula area, which is where my grandmother was from, one of the first things that struck me was around literacy. She grew up without electricity. Her parents weren't literate. She was the first generation to read and write. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, these letters are from such vulnerable mothers most of the time. The letter I chose was signed a drunkard's wife, for example, speaking about the huge impact of alcoholism and abuse in the area. And I thought, oh my gosh, these are such vulnerable populations. And these are the moms who can write. Who's not here? Who can't even participate here? And so that was really fascinating to me was there a false promise implicit in these letters? You know, one mom wrote a laundry list specifically of the socks and underwear she needed for her kids in pages and pages of sizes, thinking she had to think she was literally going to be given those objects to survive the winter, right? So something that I was really listening to was, how was this letter campaign being received by people in really desperate conditions? And what was the ethical contours of that ask?
Yeah, yeah.
Go for it.
No, I think it's fascinating, right? A couple of things stand out there, like who is not represented in these letters. I mean, that's something that we talk about in the book, which is it's tempting to see the volume of correspondence here and think, oh, everyone wrote to Smallwood. Oh, my goodness, yes, of course everyone did. But of course everyone didn't. There are lots of reasons why people didn't. Either they weren't literate. Sometimes people clearly had other people writing for them. You see that turn up in the letters as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes people, English wasn't their first language, for example. And in other ways, and Sonia's spoken about this too, those in the highest echelons of society would have probably not needed to write to Smallwood because they had a connection to Mr. Smallwood that it didn't require a letter. So there, one of the challenges of this is to sort of not only read what's there, but to read the silences, read what's not there, and think about who is not represented and why and what that means.
So this is why you've got essays in the back, like family reunification and citizenship, the meaning of Confederation for Chinese immigrants in Newfoundland, right? Miriam Wright, Robert Hahn, Mr. Hahn's been on the show before, and we've talked about this, right? The head tax and what happened then in '49, because it was never taken off the books, and all of a sudden, you could have family reunifications happening because families were separated up until
that's right
Confederation.
Yeah.
That's just me remembering my old notes from another show. You've got democracy before they were ready for it, the Hopedale Project, or protest, of 1949 and Inuit political autonomy. And then you've also got excerpt from Newfoundland Mi'kmaq Resistance and Vibrancy in a History of Erasure. So if we talk about who's not represented.
Right. And I mean, it's not saying that Mi'kmaq folks didn't necessarily write to Smallwood, but at the time, either they may not have identified that way because their family had been, had experienced racism and have sort of, quote unquote, forgotten or erased that history in their own family. Or that, they wouldn't have written to him from that angle because it might not have gotten them anywhere. There's all kinds of reasons for why that doesn't appear. But certainly in the terms of union, they were very much erased, right, and not consulted. And then, as we say, and in that excerpt, it sort of is clearly shown how, that the terms of union were drawn up in such a way that, Smallwood said, well, there are no quote unquote unions in Newfoundland and Labrador, and because everyone in Newfoundland had been enfranchised before the terms of union and before the Confederation vote, so that everyone could vote. But I think I call it the sleight of hand of enfranchisement at one point in the book, because along with enfranchisement meant, oh well, you're just like us now. You're quote unquote a Canadian or you're a Newfoundlander, and therefore you no longer are considered to be Indigenous, right? So yeah, the politics of that are very, very tricky, and thinking about those silences was something that was important to us. And in this huge book, we do talk about it in a number of ways.
And Sonia, what are your thoughts on that? Through all the research that's being done, looking at the letters that get sent in, and then recognizing and thinking about and putting in extra work around the silences to make it more wholesome.
It is. I mean, the silences are so important because there are as Vicky pointed out, there's clear evidence that some people drew on the skills of others in their community to write their letters because they didn't have access to literacy. The big thing that I think is resounding in terms of silence are also the people who probably didn't want to be seen or heard, right? So they might have been in precarious situations of various sorts, legally or in terms of citizenship type things. And so they may have actively hidden themselves, right? So those people, I'm not sure how we can ever reach what it is what their intentions were at the time, because they were actively hiding themselves. I mean, some cases you do get the sense some people hid themselves through the use of pseudonyms, which is also, I find, a fascinating thing, where they used a pseudonym, were able to bring their issue forward. But there are others who just said nothing and consciously said nothing. And I think that I would love to find a way of figuring out what those people were thinking. I don't know that that's possible. We did look through, for example, the most common Chinese Newfoundland surnames to see if we found letters, particularly from St. John's, Bell Island. We didn't find any in that particular time period that we were looking for. And so were they talking through others? Did they have different avenues in, or were they just saying the debates happening here are not our debates, and this is not what's of interest to us because we're dealing with other issues altogether? I don't know. And certainly Indigenous issues, there are 2 letters in our collection from people who write as Indigenous people and use that actively in their understanding of themselves and in the way that they write to Smallwood. Were there others who may not have known that they were Indigenous? Were there others who were Indigenous who didn't want to write because they were not invested in this conversation? Were there others who were not going to be able to write in English and had different ways of communicating in Indigenous languages, and so didn't send a letter in because, it was not part of their way of engaging with the world? And so how do we navigate that? One way that we did that was to bring in more essays, more contextual essays to speak to that kind of erasure and what that means as we look at these letters that do look, as Vicky said, like everybody and their dog wrote to Smallwood.
Yeah, and the part that sticks out for what you're talking about, it's even just feeling, when you look through these letters and some of the situations, dire situations, but still, these are folks who feel that they can have a voice, no matter how small, and send it in. And there's a difference there if you feel you don't have a voice compared to
Absolutely.
No matter your situation, being like, no, he might actually maybe listen, right? So hence this discussion of the silences and filling in some of these blanks. Jennifer, what? Tell us more about. Start to tell us about what you chose and the letter, and go into.
So in
more.
that file full of all these petitions and everything, I kept coming across this one piece of handwriting that it said, "Oh, this is Mrs." We had to give her a new name, Alice French. Okay, so I kept coming across, and eventually, and then I there was this postscript that just leapt out. And she says, "Please, Mr. Smallwood, do not offer me any sympathy in my circumstances, as both the Home Affairs and Finance Department have dished out a lot of that hooey to me." And I was like, did she really just say that? And, then I went away and it just sort of filtered down. I thought, I have to find out more about this woman, and it was just, so those letters became the core of just going with online digitized information, mostly through Grand Banks, that website, and finding out her husband, their family, and that's all wrapped into the letter as, who was she? I knew what she was asking for. But the level of personality and spunk and determination really made me know. And I have to admit that in the end, Smallwood did not grant her request. And I do think he was probably justified in not doing that. But yeah, it was just her pure vim and vigor of being heard and being determined she would be heard, and trying to marshal. She's obviously not an educated woman, but she's really marshaling all the power of the law. She got, before Confederation, she got him to make a promise in writing under his signature. And she's waving that before him and before all of the justice ministers and everything,
Yeah, the character that shines through all these years later, right? It is really, really something to kind of as you describe it, and to think about this person who was a real person. And now you mentioned, I will ask, I don't know what the explanation is around it, but why did we why are their names not included? Were these letters and changed?
Yes, so we needed, the last time we were on the show, actually, I think we were talking about this because we were looking to find descendants of the letter writers to get permission to use their names.
So why do you need permission if folks are dead?
Well, this has been a complicated legal wrangling. So it's about both copyright and privacy, which are interrelated but separate issues.
All right.
The copyright does not rest with the Smallwood estate, even though they are in Smallwood's archive. The copyright rests with each individual letter writer, and after their deaths, their descendants.
Okay.
So in order to use people's names in a published volume, you need the permission of people, because it's 75 years ago. So it's too recent.
Yeah. Because what's the length for copyright? More.
More than 75, I think.
75?
Just over 75, I think, yeah.
Okay.
And so in addition to that, you also have issues of privacy. And of course, Sonia and I were very cognizant about the smallness of this place,
of
right?
course, yeah.
You're getting a letter from, small town, small community, and people are going to recognize that name.
And
right?
someone,
all these years later.
All these years later, someone might be like, "I knew it! I knew they felt that way about the thing," and said, "Da da 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 da."
Right. So we were really cognizant about that, even before we sort of were thinking about privacy issues legally. We didn't want for anyone's life to be disrupted or anything sort of bad that could be that could come back on people. So we were really cognizant about that. So any letters that were really sensitive, we were already going to anonymize, right? Yeah. But unless we got someone's permission, we then had to anonymize basically everything. So we didn't want to lose the beautiful narrative that Jennifer had created with these multiple letters from this single woman. Yeah. So we ended up giving her a pseudonym. And the people that she talks about in the letter are all pseudonyms. So Alice French does not exist. That's not a real person. Yeah. Although there probably is an Alice French out there, but my apologies. It's not the woman who wrote these letters. So we're trying to be, really sensitive, but also maintain a sense of this is a person who existed. So, our thoughts were, we think that people would love to see their names in print, but we weren't allowed to do that. So, while it may be disappointing, that's kind of what we had to do. Yeah.
And Alice French did not respect Joey Smallwood's privacy. There's one point in her letter. One point in her letter, she writes to him and she says, "If you could only come by my house here on Cabot Street, drop by and visit me. I could explain it all to me, or I could come to your house." She says.
Yeah.
So good.
I love it. Yeah.
Well, again, it's just the color of the time.
Yeah.
Jasmine Paul is also a contributor who joins us on the line now. Hi.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. So tell us about how you got involved with this and what you looked into.
Well, I guess I got involved as I was a student. So they extended the invitation for me to participate, and they gave me the option of which district to choose from. So I chose Carbonear-Betavert district. And from there, I booked some time at the archives and went in and got into the letters.
So was there any specific reason for the Carbonear-Betavert district, or did it speak to you, or was it just, I had to choose one, so I chose there?
Well, I have family from the area, so I was kind of hoping that I might come across some letters that they had written. No luck, but I'm going to go back again and check the different districts and see if I can find any juicy family tidbits there.
What was it when you started going through the letters? What was your experience like?
I'm not sure what I expected when I was first going into it. I think maybe I thought people would send more complaints. And talk about how unhappy they were with him, but what I really found was there was mostly requests, and people, weren't shy to remind him of how what work they did to get him elected as well. But it was such an emotional process, like having the actual letters in your hand and like hearing, because you really can kind of hear the people when you're reading the letters, even though, you might just imagine their voice. But if you're from the area, you know how people talk and vernacular comes through and dialect does come through. So like it was almost like, or you were listening to open line sometimes.
Yeah,
Like,
it is very
like
much
that's
like
honestly,
that.
Or any kind of radio call-in show where people might talk about what they're experiencing, what they're feeling.
Jasmine, you're breaking up just a little bit there. Let's here. I'm going to hit pause. And Kira Mahoney, who's teching the show today, is going to just try to. We're going to try to iron out the lines. Kira, get the radio iron out, and we're going to see if we can iron this thing to make it a little smoother. It's a CBC thing we can do that's pretty magical, folks.
I
So we'll
really
try
resonate
again.
though with what Jasmine is saying there. I entered into this project in a really similar way, which was desperate to come across a familiar name or a family story. And that's something I really hope that readers can bring to their experiences too, is, we talked a little bit about the beginning about silences, and Sonia said something really interesting to me, which is, I don't know if we'll ever be able to, there's so many we will never be able to fill, or maybe we shouldn't, whatever that means. And, what's so powerful about this collection to me is that it's intergenerational. Adam, you mentioned like these themes are things that we could be talking about today. And the thing is, those silences do resonate and they live on for us. That's why we have to anonymize things, right? Because some of these really extreme violences and conditions that people are living in are impacting generations today, right? So what we're talking about isn't just a past that lives solely in the past. They're really hard, brutal, sometimes emotional, painful conversations that live on in many of the contributors like myself, So even though I didn't find a direct story from my family, it was my family's story, right? We have shared histories of collective experiences like poverty or addictions or abuse or colonial violence and war and all of these things, right, that have shaped this place and the people in it. So one of my big hopes is that readers who are figuring out who they are and the stories that shape them listen to those stories and feel empowered to shape the future together as well.
I find like reading it. It's even though I don't know these people, there's certain things that I'm like, I feel this connection, even though it's someone who I was not connected to, right? Like not my family, but it's just the way, and as we've talked about, the way the it's like the spoken words on the written page.
So alive, right?
You can connect with it, and it just jumps right out at you.
And they're human stories, right? Like we can all relate to pain and suffering. We can all relate to that shred of hope that you talked about. If you didn't still have hope, you wouldn't have written. And then that's also, I think, why that leads us to empathy for all those who didn't write in. Who maybe didn't have hope or didn't have capacity or didn't have whatever. So there's a real humanness there that I hope sparks in people when they read it to acknowledge and really listen and hear these stories that have really been unheard for so long. And I think people who can also relate to feeling unheard can maybe bring something of that to what this book asks us to do together.
Well, and also in a time, so to look at these letters and to see some of the themes through that everyone was kind of like jointly experiencing, which even though people are very different, is a unifier. And then to think of now and today, where we are in times that sometimes having a unifier or just the thought of something of that is important in when we can be in a time of political separation and folks can feel they're on other ends of things, And yet, no, we are all connected.
Yeah, and to look beyond, Joey Smallwood is such a contentious figure. When I think about how my family would talk about him,
you either had his portrait on your wall, or you definitely did not.
Not well loved in my family, but that also resonates in the moment, doesn't it? Is can we look beyond political visage to see the workings behind charisma, right? To see not just political machinations, but the impact on people, right? Like, what are we experiencing when it comes to food insecurity, to housing, to mental health, to war, conflict, technology? You know, these ultimately are extreme conditions that we're going through in different ways for different reasons. But there's something there that's really interesting to me, like you're speaking to.
Totally.
Yeah.
We've got Jasmine back on the line. Hi.
Hi, can you hear me any good now?
Oh, yeah, that was great. The CBC iron worked. So, go ahead. Tell us a bit more about what, as you were kind of reading through and things that jumped out at you.
Yeah, so I was saying, like, you know, some stuff obviously was sad, and that's for various reasons, because I guess the things that they were saying that they're experiencing, but also like I said, a lot of the problems that people had, we still have, I myself sometimes have, but then there was funny things. Some people were really very funny in like the way that they made little quips, and so it was just like, you know, you go through everything, like going through it. It's just like talking to people now. Like, you know, sometimes you're going to have a good conversation. Someone's going to make you laugh. Someone might make you cry. But I guess like the thing that stuck out the most to me, a lot of the going through the list of all the different letters that I read now, a lot of them are due with the fishery. And I guess like I picked because I'm a fisherman, so I could relate to a lot of the requests that people had, and like, you know, these things that we still need, still use. Like I have one letter here. I didn't transcribe this one, but it was written on the 2nd of March, 1950, and it reads, Mr. Smallwood, Dear Sir, I understand the loan board set up to help out fish with equipment which they need, as I need a new engine for my boat. My out, and I want 2 herring nets to secure bait in the summertime, 2 3/4 mesh. And I would also like to purchase a mackerel net for hauling mackerel, as the mackerel do be very plentiful in the summertime, ground shores. And in this letter, you know, there's spelling mistakes. So this person did their best to communicate their need. And, of course, the Fisheries Loan Board did continue for a long time. And now we have something called the Atlantic Fisheries Fund, which is not so much a loan. It's more of a grant system. So that was really interesting to see the progression, I guess, of that way of revenue or help for fishermen.
Yeah. We've been talking about connection through the show too, right? And just to think for yourself, right? Is it your 5th generation fisherman?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So 5th generation fisherman, looking back in the 50s or the late 40s, you know, around the time of Confederation, and then connecting to someone in the same industry, and then seeing some of all the great progress that's been made, but also this is still a time well before the moratorium too. Like, so there's just so much history laid on top of it.
And they had no idea that the moratorium was going to come.
No.
And another thing I thought when I was going through this too, like, these people didn't know these letters would get saved. They knew they might get read on the radio. They certainly didn't know they'd end up at the university, and anyone could go in and read them. And I would read them, and I would cry, and I would laugh. And if they knew that, how would they have written their letters? Would they have written their letters? Would they have hid their name, or maybe they wouldn't have read or written such sad, personal, intimate details? You know, and I don't want to give away the main thing from my particular piece. There was one letter that I still think about it every day, but if you read my essay, I think you'll be able to tell which one made the lasting impact on me. So, yeah, there's a little incentive to read my piece.
There you go. Good job.
Jasmine, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks,
bye.
Jasmine. Bye.
And I don't want to forget this. The copy that I've been kind of doing this with through the show that I have right here in my hand. If you would like this copy, we will draw a name afterwards. Just email thesignal@cbc.ca, and you can just put like book in the subject or what you folks normally do. But one of you can either pick it up or I will mail it to you in the coming days. So, Dear Mr. Smallwood, Confederation in the words of those who lived it, which is what we're talking about here today. Digging into a bunch of letters, and the signal at cbc.ca. Email me, and we'll have a draw, and someone will get the book. And this is one of those ones I didn't even want to do it because I wanted to keep it myself, but I am sending it out. And I thought so. This is a what we call like lightly loved book. I thumbed through it over the weekend to prepare, but it still looks brand new. So, any thoughts on what Jasmine was saying? Sonia, we'll go back to you. Any thoughts on what Jasmine was saying?
I think. One of the things that Jasmine brought out is just that you laugh and you cry. It is that the letters are more intimate than you might imagine in some cases, and at the same time so full of her personality, as Jennifer pointed out in terms of the letters that she ended up working with. That you do laugh and you cry. You're right there with the people there. And Kate pointed out earlier. She said, she hopes people are empowered to shape the future. And I think that that's something that comes out really strongly in the letters, is that these were people who were very committed and very passionate about the possible futures for Newfoundland and Labrador. And they took pen to paper, whether they had formal education or not, and they made their voices heard. And I think that that's a really important thing. I think it's really important to see how many people were sharing detailed stories, not just a little soundbite. These were detailed stories about what mattered to them and what they thought was important, not just for themselves, but for their communities and for the place that they called home. And so that notion of these letters as a form of self-empowerment, I guess, towards a collective future, I think is actually very visible in all the letters. And I think that to me, even the people who railed at Joey and even the people who were the most absolutely adoring of Joey, they loved this place with their hearts, and they wanted it the best for it, right? And I think that comes out in the letters very strongly.
So much has changed since the time of Confederation, but at the same time, like we've talked about, a lot of the themes still rhyme, right? They still cut through. Yep. Sonia, the bit you're talking about there too, the fact of people like I keep almost saying emailing, people mailing the premier with these issues. And then also either from the hope or sometimes even the strong feeling that something, whether it's a fishing net or something, or roads or something bigger will change. Is that still this place? Do we still feel, because I often, on the show, I talk about this sometimes, the difference between perhaps up along, right, whether it's Toronto or also south of the border, that this place is, even though things have changed, it is still so small that you can send a note, make a call, right? What are your thoughts?
Well, the thing I'm thinking about is we still track, right? So you still, when you meet another person in this province, you have to find out where they're from in the province, what their family ties is, how long they've been in the province, if they're a newcomer. And that's because we know that's a survival skill. We know we're going to cross paths with you again.
Yeah.
It's not like when I lived in California and people would only give their first name because they don't expect to see you again, right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of having a sense of community, like us having to make these letters anonymous, because there's a really good chance that someone connected to Alice French, and I'm saying that with quotes, to her is going to read this book and be very offended by the implications that we're making from her story, right?
Kate, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I can't really make any sweeping statements from a provincial sort of identity point of view, but I can definitely speak from mine. And I just had a baby a year and a half ago.
Congratulations!
Thank you. And I was talking to my dad about this, and I was like, my nan, like, she didn't see currency for the first time until she was, a teenager. And she can talk about the first time she saw, like, pineapple and then iPads and, world wars and what changes or, these collective experiences you were talking about, Adam, did she bear witness to in her life? And like, what does it mean to be a person here, to live my life, and he was just reminding me that there, again, are these themes of human experience that are repeating. What am I seeing in my lifetime, and what are the experiences that are shaping my life, as we watch wars unfold, shorts in graphic, fast ways on our phones. There's changes, of course, but there's also, something that just resonated for me with this experience. Again, not a sweeping statement, but just in my experience with writing this was, again, looking more to the similarities of experiences than the differences of experiences. Yeah. And by that, I mean more about the deeper themes of what was underneath rather than the particularities of, okay, can I go buy a pair of new socks versus do I have to care for sheep and shear them and card the wool and all that stuff. So, it was less about comparing the day-to-day life and more about, how are we as people navigating some really core human experiences when it comes to not just our day-to-day life, but again, more of how can we and do we and have we and will we engage in collective experiences of both violence and healing and suffering and hope and despair and creativity. The details are so different, but what is there that is lasting? How would I do it differently? Or what would I take that's the same? But really more of a meditation on stripping back the details and really asking, what are the questions that I want to ask today? And how are they going to shape the world around me?
Vicki, what did you think about Joey Smallwood's answers to people?
It's interesting. He claims some people think that he wrote a response to every single letter. We don't have all the responses to every letter. We do have some that we've put in the book. Sometimes people sent telegrams if a situation was like, an emergency. It's interesting because Heidi Coombs writes about one particular letter that came from a woman who, wrote to Smallwood about the death of her infant and the kind of epic saga of her trying to get to the hospital in the wintertime from her small community. And there were other people who wrote letters or wrote telegrams to Smallwood saying, this is the situation, we're stuck, the ice is in, we can't get the boat out, can you send a helicopter? And then Smallwood did. And there was a plane, so not a helicopter, but a plane was sent. Yeah. And they actually did do something in the moment. So it's interesting to see sometimes those real-time responses, too. I mean, we often think that it's only today that we have this instant communication. The telegraph was a revolutionary piece of technology in Newfoundland at the time, right? Yeah. And so you do see some of that. Sometimes Smallwood writes back to say, thank you for your letter. There's nothing I can do, or I'll pass it on to the proper department. Sometimes it's, wait for the election. And, if it was right after Confederation, there's an election coming, and so you just stay tuned kind of thing, So he's the consummate politician, But it's just, it's fascinating to see that personal connection and the way that people wrote to him, like Kate's talking about, like that sense that they wanted to convey not just the politics of their situation, but the personal details of their situation. Even when people wrote, we have a number of examples of petitions that people sent in on behalf of their community, signed by dozens, if not more, of people in their community. Yeah. So they were, they're actively engaged in we want the best for our community, and we hope you can do something for us. And not content to sort of sit back and wait. I mean, very much involved in that. Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead.
He was dialoguing with people for years. Like when he was doing The Barrel Man, he would read people's letters and answer them. Yeah. So people really felt they had this personal connection with him. But in my file in St. John's West, I felt like at the beginning of the year, his responses were more generous. As I got to the end of the year, and certainly the end of his correspondence with Alice French, he got a little more testy.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right, just to see the changes of
Yes.
correspondence. Sonia Boone, any other, as we wind down in time here, any other stand-up bits you wanted to bring up before the show ends, or any other thoughts?
One thing I was thinking as I hear everybody speaking, which is really wonderful to hear everybody's insights, is, a lot of people were very, very poor. It cost money to send a letter.
Yeah.
It cost money to send a telegram. And so when you've got people who write more than once, twice, three times, that is money out of their own home budget, right? And some of them are writing about things that are really vital to them in terms of the cost of living and so on, and they're taking the time and using that money to write a letter to Smallwood. So there is definitely an expectation that he can and will do something. In some cases, he did do something. As Vicki pointed out with the telegrams, there was a plane sent. You'd see a selection of 6 telegrams written within 24 hours almost, and a plane is sent as soon as the weather shifts. We did get a letter from the one that Vicki mentioned earlier that Heidi Coombs worked on, a letter about a real healthcare situation in St. Barb District. And apparently we found out, we were able to reach descendants of that particular woman who wrote the letter. And the descendants knew the letter had been written. They had not seen the letter themselves, but they knew it had been written. They knew that letter had been read on the radio. And there was also evidence that some things changed as a result of that letter having been written. So there were times when things did change. And then, of course, as Vicki said, there are some letters that are consummate political letters where he just walks around a topic because perhaps he can't answer it, or perhaps he's not in a position to respond favorably and walks around the topic a bit.
Kate, any final thoughts from you on everything?
No, I mean, the letter that I chose again was signed "A Drunkard's Wife," which I think really sums up a lot of the topics here, right around anonymity, but also the incredible courage and bravery it took for really, really vulnerable members of a community to rally and tell the stories of one another at their own risk. If you're anonymizing your own letter, it's because you know that it's not safe to speak up in any other way. And so the resilience of some of the writers to be unafraid of that silence and erasure that was so powerful and politicized at that time was so moving to me, to see the fearlessness of really speaking back to power and abuse in daily life, to advocate for children and to advocate for women, and to really have a shred of hope that gathering and telling your own story and telling the story of one another can create an impact. And I wish I could, speak back to her and say, you didn't get a response to your letter, but you are now. And what I would say is, I see the courage and the fearlessness it took to break that silence. I can't even begin to know what the consequences of that could have been for her in her life. But that there is an ongoing legacy of advocacy against, the tyranny of silence that kind of erasure and abuse perpetuates.
Sign A Drunkard's Wife.
Drunkard's Wife.
Yeah, it's like just lots of thoughts around the meaning of that.
For sure.
Line.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah.
And then time, place, everything else.
Totally.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Fantastic. So we've got emails that I saw come in. We'll draw. I will be in touch with one lucky person who will get this book that I don't feel like giving away, but I will. So thank you, everyone. That's it for the show today. Thoughts on it? The Signal at cbc.ca. Tomorrow we're staying on the history beat for a few shows this week. Actually, tomorrow on the show, a St. John's soldier killed in France 108 years ago has caught the attention of historians. Remains could be of Private George Patrick Kirk, but a family mystery is stalling the identification process. We will unpack that and then also zoom out a bit to time, context, politics, history of around the First World War for Newfoundland and Labrador. Don't miss that tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Cheers.